quarry over there has a boat, like a little dinghy boat, and its name is the Sand Pebble 2. It's a rock quarry, and they named their boat Sand Pebble 2.
Well, folks, it's that time of the year again to head up to Barnes & Noble for their bi-yearly Criterion sale. Every July and November, Criterion puts on a sale at Barnes & Noble where they are 50% off. And I mean 50% off. It's like the only time to buy these things, honestly.
The one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of copies of the same movie, so there's not a bunch of stuff. But also, I don't know what I want. I didn't come in with any kind of idea.
I didn't go into this sale really expecting to get much of anything. The last couple sales, I've only grabbed a couple of movies here and there, and I went into this one with really no kind of guidance whatsoever. I was just looking to see what they had, and they had quite a bit of stuff.
I guess I could expand upon my Lynch. I don't have a bunch of David Lynch, although I've seen most of them. I don't have much David Lynch, so I could expand upon that over here.
Honestly, the selection was really good, and I was having a hard time narrowing down what I wanted to get, but I got my little baggie of stuff, so let's head on home and check out what I grabbed, shall we? All right, everybody, we're back from Barnes & Noble down here in the creepy dungeon basement, if you will. I got my haul from the Barnes & Nobles. I actually grabbed more than I was kind of expecting. I kind of went in with the expectation of getting like a couple things, like 2 or 3 things. And actually on this trip, I found so much that I had to make selections. Like I had to narrow it down. And that was kind of surprising for me. Let's talk about my haul, y'all. This is my haul. There is many like it, but this one is mine. The first movie we're going to talk about is Sorcerer by William Friedkin from 1977. This is a film that I don't know anything about, but I've heard so many great things about it. I've heard a lot of great people say great things about this film. And out of the couple William Friedkin movies I've seen so far, I feel like I need to check out more of his stuff. This was one I believe was put out around the last Criterion sale, and the Barnes & Noble we went to didn't have a copy of it. So I grabbed a copy of it because this one had plenty of them. And now we're gonna watch it. Alright, so I just finished Sorcerer, and I have to say, this was amazing. So if you don't know what this movie is about, something that was actually kind of funny that happened was while we was at Barnes & Noble, Autumn found The Wages of Fear, which I read the back of it, and I thought, wow, that sounds really cool. And while we debated on getting it, kind of, going back and forth on it, we ended up trimming that one out of the selection for this time around, only for me to sit down and watch Sorcerer and go, this seems a lot like the synopsis to The Wages of Fear, and come to find out that this is indeed a remake of Wages of Fear. That was a little bit of a surprise as I was watching this. Going into this, I didn't know anything about this. I didn't read the back synopsis. I pretty much was just sold on hearing a lot of people say it was good, not really hearing like why they think it's good, but just hearing a lot of good things about this movie. And that's pretty much was enough for me to bite onto it. Also with, it being William Friedkin. And if you don't know what this movie's about, it is about 4 people who are all pretty degenerates of their own, who basically are on the run and end up in, I believe, Colombia. It's in Latin America. I can't remember if it says Colombia or not, or maybe I'm just making that assumption. But basically, they're all working in these like real labor-intensive, dangerous jobs, making chump change, if you could even call it chump change. We come to find out that the oil company that is there has misstored dynamite, so the nitroglycerin is leaking out of it, and so they offer the job up to candidates who can drive these trucks to transport this very volatile dynamite, and they obviously offer a lot of money, and our 4 main characters are those that are picked. Now, I will say a couple of these characters get a little bit more screen time than others, especially like Roy Scheider, the guy from Jaws, if you will. He obviously gets a lot of the screen time in terms of like development, but every character is well enough developed that as you're watching this movie, you can understand or kind of know these characters. But there is more favoritism to 2 of them. It's Roy Scheider's character and the Frenchman. Outside of that, that's like the first hour of the movie is us getting to know the characters, the predicament they're in, and getting the job. The last hour of the movie is a nail-biting, non-stop, intense thrill ride as they are trying to transport all these crazy volatile pieces of dynamite through, you know, some of the worst driving conditions imaginable. And as you know that this stuff is so volatile, mixed with how William Friedkin captures these scenes and how they, you know, for one, they did it practically, but then also on top of that is just how they filmed it. The camera frame, the blocking, showing you everything, getting right up close to it, just is so intense as you're watching this. I was on the edge of my seat. And it's not like you're like really rooting for these guys. These guys all kind of suck. You know, they all kind of suck. But you are like swarmed in, really? You're like pulled into this story. You're pulled into what this film is doing, because it does take the time to develop these characters, and then that driving is so thrilling and so intense. As you're going through, every guy in this movie is drenched in sweat, and you can understand why. Everything is sweaty, dirty, wet, and you're watching these trucks trying to go through this with, at any moment, anything can go wrong, and it just makes for such a thrilling piece of cinema that I just really, really love this one. I genuinely can't recommend it enough. The score in this movie is great. It is very kind of retro synthy, and I say that is in a way to kind of describe what you would hear now modern, because this doesn't feel like it's really from the actual 1970s. This feels like it has a lot of modern flair to that synth style score. It doesn't feel like it's from the 70s. It feels like somebody making that kind of music nowadays with that kind of retrograde in mind. And for that, it kind of has this weird soundscape that feels significantly ahead of its time, and it doesn't feel dated or potentially cheesy to kind of match it. It actually fits it very, very well tonally, and I really dug the score as I was watching this. Performances, everybody is great across the board. I mean, I really can't think of really anything negative to say about this film. From the moment it started to the moment it ended, I was glued to the screen, just nuts to butts, you know what I mean? Just raring for this thing to go, and I really loved it. And actually, you know what's funny is, on the back of it, it actually says this is a pulse-pounding reimagining of the suspense classic, The Wages of Fear. I didn't read the back of this at all. For special features, we get Freakin' Uncut, a documentary by Francesco Zippo. If I'm not pronouncing names right, I don't care. Interviews with Freakin' and screenwriter, other filmmakers, conversations about the film with film critics, conversations with Freakin' and Nick. Oh, the conversation with Refn and Freakin's on this. Oh, that's sick, actually, because I've seen that before. Not the full thing, just the snippet where Freakin' tells Refn, basically Refn's trying to say Only God Forgives is a masterpiece, and Freakin's like, really, dude? I mean, I love that movie, but it's a really funny moment, and apparently that's in there, so I'm gonna have to sit down and watch that for sure. Audio interviews, a little booklet, if you will, and some behind the scenes footage. So that is pretty cool. Pretty good little box set. This is the 4K Blu-ray combo pack, so you get the 4K along with the 2-disc Blu-ray set as well, one having the features and some supplements, I believe, and the other probably just supplements. But great release. I'm giving this one a 4.5 out of 5, so like a 9 out of 10. I really loved it. Okay, our heater just kicked on, so this would be curious to see how much of this microphone picks that up. But our next film we're going to talk about is Daisies. Daisies. What is this film about? Yeah, I've never heard of this one. This is one that is a complete blind buy for me. It's from 1966, from the Czechoslovakia, if you will. This is a film that I have never heard of before, but the artwork and the synopsis about these like kind of punk rock vibes, this anti-authoritarianism, rebellion, if you will, with apparently trippy visuals as the back of it would prescribe, made me really want to check this one out. And yeah, so let's check this one out. We'll see what it's like. So I just finished Daisies. Yeah, this is a dense one. This is a movie. So if you don't know what this is about, basically, if I can sum this up pretty simply, on a very surface level, this is a film about, and I feel like just saying that on the surface level, people are going to check out of this movie instantly. But on a surface level, it's about two Maries, one blonde, one brunette, who go on a pretty much just a self-indulgent way of life. They pretty much go around doing whatever they want, wherever they want, with whoever they want to get whatever they want. And yeah, that's the majority of the narrative feature that is here. Now, this is a film that relies heavily on its visuals to really represent what the story is. This is a very visually symbolic movie, really relies on its visual presentation to tell its story. Really, this film is really steeped in like feminist ideology. This film is really steeped in anti-authority and kind of placating, I guess you could say, like capitalist ideas in a way. Now, I don't know much about Czechoslovakia. I don't know anything about it from the 60s. So watching this, I'm probably missing a lot of nuance culturally, but I also feel like there's a lot of like anti-authority kind of rebellion here. It does have that very punk rock nature, but I will say this movie hinges solely on its visuals and editing, which are spectacular. The visuals in this movie are spectacular. This is such a uniquely visual movie in its way that it transitions from scenes, at the way that it uses things like stop motion, the way it changes colors, the way the camera moves, the way it's framed, the way it has its characters dress, and the set design and what the characters are wearing and how they're interacting with what they're wearing. There's a really interesting scene where they're like cutting up lingerie and then kind of like cutting themselves up that I thought was really interesting, and I'm not entirely sure I know what the meaning of that scene was on a first viewing. There's other pretty like unsubtle moments, like the Garden of Eden kind of moment. Obviously the base narrative is not so subtle either, and the ending is very on the nose, but as a whole, this feels like a movie that I probably need to watch a couple of times to really glean what I think is here. And this is a movie that you can really let your little art house pretentious heart go wild with it. You know, you can really glean whatever you want from this movie. You can really go as crazy and as out there as you want, or you can really rein it back and be like, yeah, this movie doesn't mean anything. It's just two girls goofing, being little goofsters, and it was boring. I don't think this movie was super boring. I know more people that would probably hate this kind of thing than enjoy this kind of thing. For me, this is, like I said, really held on the visuals and editing, because not only is that visual presentation so strong, but the editing is very strong. This is a very disjointed edit job, and it's done that intentionally to sow the chaos. A lot of the visuals and a lot of the editing is to kind of mirror what the girls are doing. They're kind of seeding that chaos and kind of putting you in the kind of space within those girls, and I think that was one of the strongest elements of the film. Now, there was a scene in this movie that I really loved. It's a scene where the girls go to this dance club, and when we see them enter in the dance club, they enter in like they're the stars of the show. They enter in like they are the stars, you know, and then quickly are brushed aside for the actual stars to come in. But as the night goes on, you know, as they're at the club, they become more and more disruptive, like, you know, Kick live streamers would be, until they become the star of the show unintentionally, until they are kicked out. And I think that is really interesting. I think that really kind of sums up what the movie is doing. These girls are living these super self-indulgent lives because they're constantly going, do you care? No, I don't care, because they're kind of indulging in that silliness of the keeping up with the Joneses in a way. And I think that is a pretty interesting commentary as a whole. And then there's also like a lot of commentary with like femininity and, you know, conventions that we would put on women, and kind of breaking those conventions and kind of like becoming, you know, your own autonomy. That is definitely there. There's, you know, snides at like the working force of like, you can only be happy if you work hard kind of thing. Then there's just times of being humor. There's times where they're playing on men's desires and expectations to get what they want, but then also to like toy with them. There's a really interesting phone call scene where the two Maries are kind of just giggling and goofing, and this guy is like expressing his love, and they couldn't really care less, and it kind of shows like how they're are kind of involved in this world of this kind of use and abuse, but also kind of plays into like, I guess the like courtship that kind of goes on in those kind of relationships and how it can kind of be one-sided and in a way. And there's a lot. I feel like there's things about this movie I'm thinking about right now on a first time viewing that I wouldn't think about it like that on a second time viewing. That is very much could be the case of Daisies. But I think what's really cool about this release in particular, in terms of physical releases, we get some audio commentary, stuff like that. I like my commentaries. What I really like is we also get 2 short films by the director, A Bag Full of Fleas and Ceiling from 1962. I love seeing shorts and where kind of directors started a little bit earlier in their career, and I love having stuff like that in this. I have not seen these yet. I've heard that these are both like 40-ish some minutes. I say I heard. I looked at them on IMDb. I saw they're like 40 some minutes, so I haven't checked those out yet. But there's also a documentary about the director and cinematographer, and a documentary just about the director as well. So there's a lot going on in this release in terms of extra features, which is really nice because the film is really short. This is a 76-minute film. It does fly by pretty quick, and I do feel like that if you decide to watch this movie, I feel like you just need to watch the first opening 5 to 10 minutes, and if you're not vibing with it within that section, you're probably not going to change your mind because it's very much the same thing throughout. Now, for me personally, I did like it. I would watch it again. I would recommend it to people that are interested in filmmaking, and I think that's or into films that are more abstract, films that are a little bit more on like the symbolic side when it comes to its presentation, and that is where that is where I would fit Daisies. For me, I'm giving this one currently a 3 out of 5, so it'd be like a 6 out of 10. I will watch this one again. I don't know when. I will watch this specifically through the lens of looking at the editing and the cinematography, or just the visuals in general, because while the cinematography is strong, the cinematography isn't the only part of the visuals. I will definitely be watching that again for this. This is a film that I feel like can inspire a lot of people creatively just through the way that this film is presented. So for that, I'm currently giving it a 3 out of 5. It could go up, it could go down on a second viewing. I said that for Sorcerer. I'm going to say it for Daisies. I think I said it for Sorcerer. If I didn't, I meant to. All right, let's see what else we got in this little baggie here. Ooh, we got a little bit of a mystery. A little bit of a mystery. It's a mystery. This is a film that I picked up for a video that I'm doing next month. If you want to hear about what that movie is, then you got to check out that video next month. And if you don't want to miss it, then be sure to subscribe with the notifications turned on. That was a movie I've never even heard of before, and it just sounded really cool. But it also sounds like it could fit with this video that I'm doing for December. So, you know. we'll see, but I'm going to save it for that just in case. The next pickup is The Shrouds. This is the newest David Cronenberg movie, and this one's kind of interesting because it's from Criterion Premieres. I don't know if it'll focus on that at all, if it would just stay on me. It's just staying on me, ain't it? You dirty son of a gun. This is by Criterion Premieres. I don't know if this is a new Criterion line. I know they did Janus Contemporaries, and this is kind of a Janus Contemporary release in comparison because there's like no special features on this like at all. So there's a Meet the Filmmakers, a Criterion Channel original interview and trailer. That's notes by a critic. That's it. That's all you get with this. This is the newest David Cronenberg movie. I like David Cronenberg. I admire his work. I don't know if I'd go as far to say that I love him as a director. From what I've seen, I find a lot of his stuff really interesting, and I do kind of want to work through his filmography at some point in my life. But this was one that my wife, that was on the chopping block, but my wife kind of talked me into going ahead and getting, and yeah, let's check it out.
What about your plans for world domination?
Delusional. I just need to bury myself.
Okay, so The Shrouds is probably hands down the worst David Cronenberg movie I've seen. Actually, I would probably go as far as say it's one of the worst movies I've watched in 2025. This movie sucked tremendously. No, this film is about Vincent Castle's character, who is a tech guy for the Shrouds by Grave Tech. And what that basically is, it's a shroud that goes around your dead relative. And when they're buried, they have these tombstones that have screens on them, and you have an app on your phone, and you can view your decaying corpse of your loved one. That's the big technology of it. It's one of those things that's like so far-fetched in technology that it's like, I don't believe this would actually be very successful. It is about him. He is grieving over his dead widow and trying to overcome that when his Grave Tech Industries gets an attack, and he tries to figure out who did the attacking. This is one of the most boring movies I've seen in a long time. This movie meanders and drags beyond belief. And the one thing with Cronenberg that I've always liked is typically in his movies there is a kernel of something very interesting. One of my least favorite ones I've seen before this is Map to the Stars, but there was still like that core kernel that was kind of interesting. But this movie does not have that. The core concept is very surface value. It's very shallow. And then on top of that, it has some of the most atrocious dialogue I've heard in a very long time. The dialogue in this movie is super cringe. Feels very much like, I am human. Humans talk like this and human speak is like this. It is super exposition dumping, but it also feels like it thinks it's more sophisticated than it is. And that comes off as very cringe. Kind of like if like McDonald's was like, hey, we have a gourmet meal here at McDonald's. It's like, all right, settle down. Like, you're not, IHOP. Like, come on, chill out. But no, in all honesty, this one was a hard one to sit through because it had nothing going for it for me whatsoever. Vincent Castle, Diane Kruger, and Guy Pearce are all actors that are fantastic, that have nothing to work with here, and also feel like there's a scene toward the end of the movie that's a big conflict. It's supposed to be anyway, like a big conflict, and these actors feel like they have no direction. It feels like these actors have no idea what emotions they're supposed to convey, and when the dialogue is as cringe, on the nose, as almost like just AI generated, it would be hard to try to figure out what emotions you're supposed to have. These characters don't feel like real characters. They don't even feel like characters. They feel like, I don't even know how to describe them. They feel like just some kind of surface level amalgamation RPG character that has you didn't develop any of the skill trees to. It just dragged the entire thing down completely. When I think of Cronenberg, there's a lot of things that I think about, and a lot of those things that I think about is some kind of interesting way to explore technology. Body horror obviously is a big standout. None of that is here or done very well. There's also like some, from what I've seen in Cronenberg, in the past, some like self-exploration and kind of like some self-loathing grief. Nothing is here. Like, none of that is here. It's all absent. I will say, hands down, this is one of the worst looking movies I've seen in a very long time. This movie looks atrocious. The lighting is terrible. It looks very artificial. The framing and blocking is as bland as you could possibly come to. And then the CG moments is actually sci-fi channel original level bad. This looks like CGI that would have been cheap and bad back in 2004. Not in today's age, but even back then. The CGI in this movie is atrocious. It's some of the worst I've seen in quite a while, and implemented in very bizarre and weird places that doesn't need to be implemented in. The small pseudo sections of body horror that's here feel super underbaked and very tame, I guess, in a way. There's nothing exciting being done here. Honestly, for me, I'm giving this one a 1.5 out of 5, a 3 out of 10, if you will. And I'm giving that half of a star just because it's Cronenberg. Honestly, this is way closer to a 1 star than a 2 star. And yeah, I genuinely cannot recommend The Shrouds. His movie he did before this, Crimes of the Future, I actually enjoyed quite a bit. This one, I can't recommend this one. I really thought this movie was terrible. In all honesty, oof. What else is in the baggie? Let's look. We have, actually, this one is the first movie that I picked up off the shelf. Another blind buy. Most of these are blind buys, with the exception of 2 of them. One of them being I've heard a lot about, and the other one was Sorcerer, which I've heard good things about, but I didn't really know what the story was about. This movie, along with Daisies, I have never heard of. I mean, The Shrouds I knew, at least Cronenberg was involved, but I'm going to quit stammering. That is Black God, White Devil. So between the title both the cover art and the synopsis, this really piqued my interest. And yeah, let's just go watch this thing. So I wish I could like get my knee up in frame. So anyway, Black God, White Devil. Yeah, there's a lot to this movie I really like and admire. There's also some things I really didn't like about it. So let's kind of get into this one. This is a film by Galber Rocha. I don't know if I'm saying that right. This is a Brazilian film from 1964. Manuel gets cheated by his employer, and in doing so, Manuel kills him. Well, I mean, rightfully so. Honestly, if you watch the scene, you're like, yeah, makes sense. So him and his wife flee, where they end up in the arms of a very disturbing cult and preacher of that cult that Manuel kind of falls over head first for. In the process of doing so, leads up to a very disturbing scene that I was not expecting, and we kind of test his will, his willpower, his will to be, and to kind of relinquish his sins. A hired assassin comes to take out that parish. Rosa and Manuel find themselves in the arms of a bandit. That bandit wants to basically kind of be like a violent Robin Hood, kind of wants to take out the rich to help free the poor. That is essentially Black God, White Devil. So let's talk about the things I liked first, and then we'll get into the things I didn't like. First and foremost, I feel like I've been saying this a lot. Visually, I think this film is stunning. I think the visuals in this film look absolutely great. A lot of it is out in the very dusty desert, a lot of the time during the daylight, but that black and white adds a lot of stark contrast throughout the scenes as we go from location to location, even if a lot of the location feels kind of repeated. There is some great shots here and there, but one thing that I liked visually the film was doing was with Rosa. So the first time I noticed it, I was like, oh, she's not in focus. I'm like, that's weird. Well, then it kept doing it. So I'm going to infer that it was done on purpose because she's never really like the focus of Manuel, even though he kind of claims her to be. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you, I have the right to. So I found that really interesting. There is a lot on a visual level that I find interesting, especially a lot of the handheld shots. There are some very good examples of handheld cinematography in this movie that I thought worked really well. Another thing I really loved was the music in the film. A lot of the music is actually singing about what is happening in the film itself, and that adds a really kind of folklore aesthetic to the entire movie that I really dug and got behind. I also think this film has a very strong narrative overall. The actual meat and potatoes that's here with this story is one that I think is really interesting, as it constantly tests the resolve of Manuel, who really doesn't have much of a resolve to begin with. It's kind of a commentary, at least I feel like, on Manuel and being in that predicament where he feels cheated, but he doesn't really have the characteristics or resolve to excel in this environment that he's in. And I feel like he puts himself in a position where he falls back on, I mean, it's kind of a verbiage that I've heard before, which is, you take away from people and they fall back on religion and guns. And he falls back into the parish that is horrific. And then he falls in with the bandits that is kind of horrific, and it's not really solving the issue. He's kind of a lost character. It doesn't really solve the issue. That kind of leads into some of the things that I didn't like. First and foremost, I hated the ending to this movie. I was sitting there and it goes the end, and I was like, wait, what? That's the end of the movie? That's like the end? Seriously? That's what we're going to have for the ending? I personally didn't like the ending. I felt like it just kind of ended out of nowhere. And a lot of that is back because I think the movie has some incredibly bad pacing. It would be a good study, at least in my opinion, of what I would think of as bad pacing in a film, where a lot of this movie does move by really quickly. Like, there's a lot of scenes in this movie that are lightning fast that unfortunately are very important moments in this movie, and you can blink and miss them, where there's other moments in this movie that drag on and on and on and on. And for me personally, if I were to edit this movie, I would probably trim about 30 minutes out of it, and I think you would have a much stronger film, in my opinion. And I'm saying that as the guy that put a 5-minute file dragging scene in my movie new folder. Okay, so I will call the kettle. This is the kettle calling the pot black. But with that being said, that pacing does make this movie kind of hard to recommend, because that was the biggest issue in the movie, hands down, in my opinion, is just that pacing. Then on top of that is there's basically 3 arcs in this movie, and arc 2 and 3 are kind of exactly the same. Arc 2 and 3 are pretty much the same arc, and so because of that, I really feel like that pacing problem is kind of amplified. But with that being said, I still think what's here narratively is very interesting and kind of thought-provoking and gives you something to chew on afterwards, while also being pretty entertaining while watching it. And I will say that this film is worth a watch for sure. Something that I've noticed the more I watch movies is that I could watch a movie for the first time, have a lot of issues with the pacing of that movie, but I can go back to that movie and not really have as much of an issue with pacing. Sometimes it's exaggerated and it's worse, but I feel like a lot of the time it's better on a second viewing because you know what to expect from that pacing. So you kind of know, it's like, all right, I know there's lulls in this movie where the pacing is really uneven and it kind of dips off. And what I mean by, pacing, I'm talking about like the ebb and flow of scenes, so that scenes have a natural progression, natural transition, and we don't kind of stay too long. And that way, when we do have these faster paced scenes, they kind of flow naturally with these slower paced scenes. This movie will have a scene where a guy is carrying a rock for like 15 minutes, and then we'll have a shootout scene that's 30 seconds long. That's what I mean by like that. That's not very strong pacing, because we're not developing the character very much in these slower scenes, where in these fast scenes we can develop a lot very, very quickly. And that was part of the problem. But maybe going back and rewatching it, knowing what to expect in that pacing, it may not be as big of an issue the second time around. I'm giving this one a 3 out of 5 for right now, like a 6 out of 10, but that is closer to a 3.5 instead of a 2.5. And it's one that could go up or down on a second viewing, and I do want to rewatch this at some point. There is a lot of things aesthetically that I like about this movie. There's a lot of interesting ideas that this film is doing, and there is a lot within its narrative and visual presentation that I do really enjoy. It just comes down to that ending, and it comes down to that really rocky pacing for me that did take me out of the experience as I was watching it. Overall, though, as a whole, it's definitely worth a watch. I did enjoy it quite a bit, and I do look forward to eventually rewatching this at some point in time. I also want to say real quick before we move on to the last pickup that this film does come with audio commentary by the restoration producer, a new interview from a film scholar, a documentary about the director, a documentary on the Brazilian film movement, and a short documentary on the origins of Cangaços, basically the kind of bandits of Brazil. So that's pretty cool, and an essay. So pretty good little set of features to include with this set that I'll probably check out at some point. Who knows? Maybe we'll see. All right. So the last movie of this little baggie is The Last Temptation of Christ, the film by Martin Scorsese, one of my favorite directors. He would be on my Mount Rushmore of directors, and there's like a handful of his films left I still need to see. There's Cape Fear, surprisingly King of Comedy, The Age of Innocence. But yeah, there's a couple of his movies floating out there that I still need to get my grubby little hands on, and one of them, of course, is The Last Temptation of Christ. Now, this is a movie that I have had on my watch list for a long time, obviously, and it's one that throughout the years of doing the Criterion sale that I picked up and put down, picked up and put down, picked up and put down. Barnes & Noble had one copy, and I thought, you know what? I think it's time that I finally grab this one. So I am excited to finally check this one out, so let's go watch it.
I want to be your son. I want to pay the price. I want to be crucified and rise again.
If there's one thing that I've learned this week watching movies, for me it's been about a week, is that I've basically been lounging in the same clothes all week. I'm a bum, okay? I don't know what to tell you. So I just finished The Last Temptation of Christ, and what a way to end off in. What's kind of funny is we started off really strong with Sorcerer, and now we're ending very strong with The Last Temptation of Christ. This film is outstanding and is probably going to become a new favorite of mine for Martin Scorsese. I mean, it's not going to like dethrone like Goodfellas or, whatever, but it's probably going to move its way somewhere in the top 5 for me, because this is magnificent in every sense of the word. Whether or not if you believe in Jesus Christ, you have to admit that the story of Christ is incredibly compelling, and one of, at least in my opinion, one of the most interesting stories around a historical figure in our world. Doesn't matter if you follow him or not, I still think it's a compelling story, and The Last Temptation of Christ is one of the most unique voices in that story of how it goes about telling the story of Jesus in Nazareth. William Dafoe plays Jesus, and then we see a nice little slew of great actors pop up as well, including Harvey Keitel, who it was a little funny hearing Judas speak in a New York accent, but at the same time, it fit really well, and Harvey Keitel just is such a great actor. Honestly, like watching this, I was just like, man, you know what? I always talk about like my favorite actors, and I never bring up Harvey Keitel, but he has to be in that talking point because he is phenomenal. I always say William Dafoe is one of my favorites, or Willem Dafoe, if you will. I know I always want to say William, and I know it's Willem, but I always want to say William. Willem Dafoe is one of my favorite actors as well. So what's interesting about this one is this is based off of a novel, The Last Temptation of Christ, and not the Gospels. And what that does is it humanizes Christ a lot more than what the Gospels do in a way. In the Gospels, if you read about it, Jesus Christ seems very much like the Messiah, the Son of God, and this otherworldly presence that is here to, grace us all and to save us. Last Temptation of Christ humanizes him more and makes him more of a flawed character. This is a character who is dealing with his own temptation, dealing with his own, is it destiny, is it preset destination, or is it, free will? And that really concludes in a fantastic climax of the movie that I genuinely was really surprised by and really loved. With that being said, I feel like if you're a diehard Christian, this movie could really upset you. In all honesty, it could really bother you with some of the, I wouldn't say liberties, but some of the interpretations and the way that Jesus is portrayed and presented. Being that flawed character, being a human with human desires and trying to learn his way of becoming the Messiah and trying to find his, basically figure out himself, is a very fascinating one. And that last temptation being that climax of the film just really feels like it's full circle, and it's great. There's another scene in this movie that like I said, I love the climax of this movie, but there's another scene that I thought was utterly fantastic, and that is when he's feasting out in the desert. I thought the way that this film presented that scene and that story was done so magnificently, and it's great. It's just great storytelling. It's a great way to present that story and to actually like materialize it, and it was fantastic. This film is a hulking 2 hours and 43 minutes. It's a long film, but I really didn't feel it at all. This breezed by very quickly with very strong pacing. And when you have such great performances and this great pacing, it just, like I said, it just flew by. That 2 hours and 43 minutes really did feel more like an hour and a half to me. It just flew by on screen. The film can be, I should say, grotesque. I think if you know anything about the story of Christ, especially if you've watched The Passion of Christ, it can be pretty brutal. This film does not shy away from that either, and a matter of fact, uses that violence to make a point sometimes. If you've seen a lot of Martin Scorsese films, you know that he has a way with violence, and that does come across here in the film as well. But I think it's done, I don't know if I'd say tastefully, but it's done to make a point within those scenes. The thing that I really enjoyed about this overall is that the humanization of Jesus Christ himself, where he's almost more relatable because of those human flaws and that like human questioning of like, am I the Son of God? Like, what is God? What are these teachings? And trying to find that way. There is like a moment, I feel like there's a moment where, that kind of Messiah level gets to Jesus's head a little bit, and you see that when he confronts the parish, where not the parish, the temple, the story where Jesus goes into the temple and uproots the tables for the like trade and schmeckles and stuff, and you see that kind of in that moment where I feel like he's literally riding on a goat, smiling and stuff, and then he's confronting the priests of the temple, and I feel like you can kind of see there where it was like that power going to him a little bit. But like I said, the crux, the crucifix, if you will, of the film though is that amazing climax that I just really was not expecting and really, really loved. I thought that was done so well and really ties together the entire story and really elevates Christ from that more humanistic portrayal into almost like that mythic level. and then the way the film actually ends, I don't want to spoil it. I mean, obviously it's a story, but I don't want to spoil the way this movie decides to end. Was just really artistically done, and I really enjoyed that presentation because it does solidify that, you know, that transcendence from human to something that is legend, I guess, if that makes any sense. And I mean, if you know the ending story of Christ, that doesn't spoil what I'm talking about with this movie. I'm basically talking about the transition into the credits, if you will. So that's what I'm talking about there. I'm not saying that's the whole climax, but I really like that as well, as that last act of the film was done really well. This film is just brilliant all around. This is really, really, really great. And like I said, if you're a hardcore Christian, I would maybe be a little hesitant going into this, just because, like I said, it's not told very much from a Christian aspect. But as a film and as a story of Jesus of Nazareth, this personally is one of the it is the best one that I've seen. This is the best in terms of filmmaking, but it's also the best in the way it presents the story. And for me, this is a new classic for me. So that has been my haul for this Criterion cell. You know, this cell I went into with very little expectations of what to pick up, and actually left with some really great stuff. I think it's funny that we opened and closed on great bookends, and we kind of had the worst movie in the middle. That none of that was planned, so that was really interesting. But yeah, that was my little haul from Barnes & Noble. So if you want to support what I do, you can check out my links down below. Consider becoming a patron or a member. Subscribe, like, share, all that stuff goes a long way. And if you picked up anything from the Criterion cell, let me know. I'm going to leave. Goodbye.